to Northview High School. My name is Reddy and I am a member of the Student Leadership Johns Creek Class of 2023 and a Johns Creek High School junior. Tonight, my fellow student leadership ambassadors and I are looking forward to presenting 6 candidates who are vying for 3 offices of interest to Johns Creek voters in the November 8th election. As a side note, we would like to remind everyone that the last day to register to vote is October 11th. So, mark your calendar. I would like to take a moment to introduce my ambassador peers. Here we have Tiffany Abasahan, who's also from Johns Creek, Varsha Nirmal, Shruti Balanshander, and Neha Guram, who all attend Northview. Lakshana Ramanan and Alicia Coley, who are both from Innovation Academy, and Arya Smith and Nicholas Stone, who both attend Chattahoochee High School. On a quick note, I'd like to make an important announcement. I'm so excited to tell you that we just learned this week that we were awarded a grant from the Library of Congress for our next project regarding COVID's impact on Johns Creek. We want to thank Principal Newhouse for permitting us to hold this debate here at Northview. We are very grateful for this opportunity you have provided for all of us. Our student ambassador team would also like to thank Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's office for supporting the ambassador program, as well as the competition. Now, on to the candidates. This evening, we will hear from both candidates for State Senate District 48, Shawn Still and Josh Uddin. For the State House District 48 seat, Scott Hilton and Mary Robichaux will be speaking to you. And Michelle Ah and Narender Reddy are both vying for State House 50 seats. Thank you to the candidates for making time for us this evening. I would also like to acknowledge several dignitaries who are with us tonight. First off, we have Superior Court Judge Rochelle Carnesale. Fulton County Superintendent Mike Looney. Fulton County School Board member and new program director for our expanded SLJC program, Linda McCain. Fulton County Area Superintendent Brian Downey. President of the Georgia Student Finance Commission, who has served in many state roles, including former House 50 State Representative Lynn Riley. Leadership Johns Creek Board member MJ Jalim. Student Leadership Class of 2022 member and winner of the inaugural Michael E. Bodker Award, Anastasia Stoyanov. Northview Principal, Mr. Martin Newhouse. Mary Beth Cooper, who has helped us for the past few months develop questions, write scripts, etc. Thank you. And Executive Director of Leadership, Johns Creek, Irene Sanders. I apologize. 2 more. Johns Creek Councilman Larry DiBiase. And Johns Creek City Councilwoman Stacy Skinner. Now, let's get to the rules of the debate. Now, prior to the debate, we allowed the candidates in each post to pick a number between 1 and 1,000. And we assigned the question boxes from closest to furthest from that number. The opening statements will be in alphabetical order by post, and the closing statements will be in reverse order. Candidates are allotted 2 minutes to answer for both. We have asked the candidates to use their opening statements to answer the following question so we are able to get to know them just a little better. Why do you consider yourself the best candidate for the post you are running for? Please give examples of your leadership roles during your statement. Now, a question will be randomly drawn from a box by a moderator for each post. At each post, the first candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. Their opponent will have 1 minute to rebut. And then the original candidate will have an additional 1 minute to make their final remarks. We will also have a series of lightning round questions in which the candidates will either answer yes or no. The cards will be on the table. As a reminder, please hold your applause for the end of the debate. Finally, I would like you to silence your cell phones and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Principal Newhouse.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Principal Newhouse. Our moderators for the debate will be Lakshana Ramanan and Arya Smith and Alicia Kohler. Arya will begin the debate by asking candidate Skill to begin his opening statement. On that note, let the debate commence.
Thank you, Brady, for that formal introduction. Thank you all so much for coming. As Brady said, my name is Arya Smith, and I'm a senior at Chattahoochee High School, and I'll be one of your moderators tonight. So to begin, I'm going to draw a question out of the box, and this first question will be for candidate Stowe. Candidate Stowe. Currently, the vast majority of states have some sort of legalized gambling, including lotteries. Should casino gambling be legalized in Georgia, and if so, where should the state revenue be embarked? You have to.
Thanks for the question. We were told backstage, do we need to do what are we doing, opening remarks? And I just want to make sure we're following order. Do you want me to answer the question first?
I'm so sorry. Okay.
That's okay, guys.
Opening remarks first.
Okay.
Yes, so
Okay,
you
cool.
know, opening remarks.
We're good? All right, just making, sorry. Hi everybody, my name is Shawn Still. I have lived in Johns Creek since before it was Johns Creek, when we used to be equal parts of Alpharetta and Duluth. I have lived here my entire adult life, and I am deeply ingrained in the community. I'm a business owner here. I employ over 100 Georgians in my district, and I'm deeply involved in economic development and job creation, even immigration programs. I've sponsored numerous employees to be able to go from work visas all the way through to permanent resident to becoming U.S. citizens. I deeply understand our healthcare crisis. I understand our border crisis. I was deeply involved in our elections and making sure that SB 202, our bill that passed last year, made Georgia made it Georgia the best state, and the highest state, the highest election reform in the country. So I have been intimately involved in a variety of areas. If we were following economic policies that were proposed to us at the beginning of COVID, we'd still be shut down, you'd still be wearing masks, and we would not be where we are today. Georgia has been the #1 state in the country to do business 8 years in a row. And we only have achieved that through these steps that Governor Kemp and the current state legislature has set forth. I'm also going to be working to make sure that our police are fully funded. And lastly, I'm going to be fighting to reduce and eliminate our state income tax, something that our Fulton County Commissioners have been trying desperately to harm the folks of North Fulton with, and I'm going to make sure that that stops. Thank you.
My name is Josh Uddin. I have been living here in Johns Creek and Suwannee area, also Fulton County, almost 35 years. I came to this country as an immigrant. When I came here first time, they always talk about that America is a land of opportunity, but when I come here, I find out that it is a land of struggle, and I found out hard way. However, I went to school here at Georgia State University while I was going to college. In my senior year, I owned 4 businesses in Buckhead, employed over 100 employees, also almost 12 City of Atlanta police officers. And from the beginning that I was a business person, I have 2 daughters, one going to Georgia State right now. She will be graduating this year. I have another daughter who goes to Johns Creek High School. I am a graduate from Georgia State. My wife went to Georgia State. I'm a true believer of public education system. Same token, I am also fighting and running this election to make sure that our voting rights are properly restored, making sure that all the women's rights are properly restored. I need to make sure that, and we need to make sure that our teachers are getting properly paid so they can make our kids as a world-class citizen. And healthcare is every issue, every politician that talk about it. I have a healthcare background. I have been doing health insurance business almost over 25 years. And if I get elected to this state senate, I will be the only person who has experience when it comes to healthcare industry and health insurance issues. I will discuss during our debate, and I want to thank the debate authority and the school team inviting us. Thank you.
Awesome. Good evening. How's everyone doing? I want to give a huge thanks to the student leadership group here. Can we give them a big round of applause for doing what they're doing tonight? I've got to you guys. I ran for class president. My first political job was junior class president, and I look where I am today. I only had 65 kids in my class, so I needed 5 buddies to vote for me, and I won, and here I am. But good for you guys for doing this. Number 2, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the folks in Florida right now who are really suffering going through Hurricane Ian. So my prayers and thoughts go with them. We've got family down there, and so we'll be checking in on them throughout tonight. But it's awesome to be here. I've built a lifetime of service to our community. My wife and I, who's sitting in the back there, gorgeous, met at Georgetown University. We came here to Atlanta through Emory, did my MBA in capital markets and finance there, and very quickly got involved in our local community. Served on the board of the Peachtree Corner Civic Association, our HOA, and then really kind of rose up from there and had an opportunity to serve in the Georgia House. Served from 16 to 18 and passed a number of bills with bipartisan support, helping people with disabilities, expanding education choice, and did a lot of great things. In 2018, Governor Kemp reached out and said, "Scott, would you come work for me and help me eliminate and streamline state government for small business?" So I was honored to serve Governor Kemp for the last 2 years. Most recently, I serve on the board of DBHDD, which was responsible for helping people with mental health and special needs. It would be an honor to serve as your state representative, and I ask for your vote on October 17th and on Election Day. Thank you.
So also thank you, the student leadership of Johns Creek, for hosting this event. It's an amazing opportunity. So I'm actually State Representative Mary Robichaux. I have been honored to serve for the past 4 years as the state representative for House District 48. I also, for the last 2 years, I've served as the treasurer for the Democratic House Caucus and on the leadership committees. On a personal note, I'm a wife of 44 years to my wonderful husband here. I'm the mother of 41-year-old twin boys who actually are products of Fulton County School System. I'm also the grandmother of 2 beautiful little girls, and I've lived in Alpharetta and Roswell for the last 34 years. I believe that one of the reasons that I'm best qualified to serve the people of House District 48 is due to the breadth and scope of my experience both in the public and the private sectors in which I've been honored to serve. My career is grounded in healthcare. I have over 40+ years, both on a clinical perspective and management side. When I was in healthcare, my career, when I ran in 2018 and won. Prior to that, I actually served as the Vice President for the American Heart Association for the Division of Quality for the Greater Southeast of the United States. I worked with over 700 hospitals and healthcare providers across all of these states and territories, making sure that we had cardiovascular health deliverable to people. With that, I know that we can get things done. I always focus on the patient. Now I'm focused on the constituents. You know, many of my bills have been put into other things because we get things done for Georgia. What I like to say is that we need to have conversations, and I call them adult conversations. That way we can listen and learn to each other. We can create win-win situations that we can all thrive and succeed. Thank you.
Quick note, as a reminder, please hold your applause to the end of the debate.
Good evening. It's great to be back at Northview High School, and thank you so much for Student Leadership Johns Creek for moderating tonight. I'm Dr. Michelle Au. I'm a practicing physician here in Metro Atlanta. I have 3 kids, all of whom are products of Johns Creek Public Schools, and I'm the current state senator for District 48. So I ran for office because, as a physician, I could see that many of the factors that make our patients unhealthy in the first place actually are far outside our ability to address at the bedside. Some of these factors obviously include things like high healthcare costs and lack of access to health insurance, but they also include factors like economic opportunity, food and housing costs, public safety, and access to quality education. These are all issues that I have focused on as your state senator. To address high cost of medical care, I authored a bill requiring insurance companies to cover the cost of emergency health care. This bill passed unanimously out of both chambers and was signed into law. I was proud to vote to suspend the state gas tax and to lower the state income tax to give some measure of economic relief to hardworking Georgian families. I helped to pass the Mental Health Parity Act, which increases access to and coverage of mental health care here in Georgia. That also passed unanimously out of both chambers and was signed into law. And I've been a vocal proponent of gun safety legislation, sponsoring legislation that requires mandatory background checks and waiting periods for firearm purchases. That latter bill was filed after the Atlanta spa shootings that affected so many members of our AAPI community. As a result of that work, I was awarded State Legislator of the Year from Everytown and Moms Demand Action. I've been an incredibly effective legislator, so much so that the Republican majority gerrymandered me out of the core of my state Senate district. So I am running for the State House in order to continue doing this work for Johns Creek and to give you the expertise and experience that you deserve.
They said my time is only 2 minutes, but because of my accent, I have to speak slowly, so I should have got 3 minutes for each question. Anyway, otherwise I will speak like an Amtrak train. Thanks to the student leadership, the main reason I accepted this debate is some of them we turned down, but this one is for the students. If the students are so involved in the politics, that's what we want to see. My life started 40 years back in America, 35 years in Georgia, and 30 years on this side of Chattahoochee and that side of the Chattahoochee. My kids in those days, the schools were not that great, so both my daughters went to the private school here in North Fulton. 30 years back that was, we started. Today they both are medical doctors. That's why I understand what is the value of the investment in education. Education is the primary thing to get out of poverty or to achieve the highest success. That's what we believed in. In the leadership-wise, I led a lot of community organizations as president and many positions. If you know, community organizations are not easy to lead. 3 people, 4 opinions, but I have to work with everybody. The real leader is who not only works with people who agree with him, but also who disagree with him. I'm that kind of leader. I am on the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority as a board member appointed by Governor Sonny Perdue in the first 2003. Afterwards, it went on, I was reappointed by the Nathan Deal and Brian Kemp. For the last 19 years, I've been on that board. Now, also, we co-founded a bank in Suwannee. I was on the board of the bank, and I served it. These are all leadership positions, and as the debate continues, you will know more about me, and you will make the right decision. Thank you.
Now we will begin the first round of our debate.
Sorry about that buffer earlier, but let me repeat questions. Candidate Stone. Currently, the vast majority of states have some sort of legalized gambling, including lotteries. Should casino gambling be be legalized in Georgia? And if so, where should the state revenue be embarked? You have 2 minutes to answer.
So I think that we've learned the Hope Scholarship is a result of the lottery system. So I'm a huge fan of that. I think we need to continue that program. I'm okay with electronic sports. I'm open to hearing more about electronic sports betting. I believe that people want to do things on their phones and that sort of thing. Gambling. I'm open to hearing about that. Casinos, absolutely not. Casinos are the #1 source of drug trafficking, #1 source of human trafficking, and I will not allow anything like that to happen on my watch. Further, I've been to Vegas. Some of y'all have probably been to Vegas. It's fun to visit. I don't want to live in Las Vegas, and I don't want to bring that back to Atlanta. So as far as I'm concerned, it's an open and shut case when it comes to casinos or anything related to that.
Candidate Uddin, you will have 1 answer, please.
For the casino here in Georgia, I think this is a very broad aspect. We need to discuss more about that. But one thing I can tell you that in Georgia, we already have lottery is legal. We already have a coin is legal, which is coin-operated amusement machine. You will see that everywhere. But I do feel that this coin machine, the Georgia lottery, they get only 9% commission. I strongly believe that that commission should be increased. However, by doing that, those small business owners who has the machine at their store or the master licensee, they should be getting some sort of benefit, such as, example, right now they cannot give out the cash. They should have some sort of cash value into it, but that can bring billions of dollars to Georgia's economy, and we can make sure that with that money, our students, our kids, all the high school, all these students in Georgia, they can get free education by doing that. Thank you.
Candidate Still, you have 1 minute to make 5 minutes.
Hope scholarships and lotteries are very different than casinos. The question was about casinos. Casinos are not going to pay for our kids' educations. Casinos are going to increase human trafficking and drug trafficking. We have to stop this. Attorney General Chris Carr has fought so diligently. First Lady Marty Kemp has made this her #1 priority. If we are not trying to stop this in our backyard, where are we going to stop it? There have got to be better ways to fund education and tax incentives for the casinos from Biloxi and Las Vegas and moving into Georgia. Absolutely not.
Thank you for your responses. We will follow the same format, and this time I will draw a question that will start with candidate Uddin. Candidate Uddin, our planet is currently experiencing detrimental effects of climate change and depletion of natural resources. What policies would you propose to increase environmental sustainability in Georgia? You have 2 minutes to respond.
The world is facing climate control issues. And just recently, current administration, they passed a new dollar amount to go out to everywhere, which will be benefited many countries around the globe, but especially in this country. What I believe, we have to have sustainable energy. We have to have solar energy. We have to have electric vehicles, which already we see in our Georgia's economy. Electric vehicle and also battery plants, they are playing a big role. So we need to also have the houses are more efficient, energy efficient. That's the only way we can save this planet. Thank you.
You use the words environmental sustainability. If we look at what's happening in California right now, the highest environmental regulations in the United States, and yet their power grid is shutting down. They're telling you that you cannot charge your electrical cars for peak hours for 8 hours a day, and yet we're talking about going all electric. I had an electric car 2 weeks ago, and I had it for 2 days. Why? Because the technology isn't there yet. So we have to be responsible, but we have to be mindful about how to do it. I own a whitewater outfitter in North Carolina. My whole world revolves around water. In South America, in the United States, in my business here in Atlanta. Water is the key to all of this, as is energy preservation, but we have to do it sustainably, we have to do it thoughtfully, and we can't just blindly pass Green New Deals and think that the country's going to catch up. Thank you.
I don't have anything to say about it.
Moving on to State House seat 48.
Hi, my name is Uddin. I will be your moderator for tonight. This first question is for candidate Hilton. You will have 2 minutes to respond. Candidate Hilton, if you were granted the ability to push through one piece of legislation without guaranteed passage through the House and Senate and the governor's signature, what would it be and why?
I can't hear you.
Repeat the question.
Candidate Hilton, if you are granted the ability to push through one piece of legislation with no barriers, a guaranteed passage through the House and Senate and the governor's signature, what would it be and why?
Man, that's a great question. There's so many things that I would put through. The first thing that comes to mind, so Georgia's budget is about $30 billion. We spend roughly half of that on education, another 25% on that on healthcare. As I mentioned earlier, I serve on the board of DBHDD. We have a waiting list of about 7,000 folks right now on that waiting list who are waiting to be served, who are eligible to receive Medicaid and who are not right now. We absolutely need to address that in Georgia. These are folks, again, who are eligible and should be receiving those services from the state. Frankly, the only responsibility of the General Assembly is to pass a budget. Beyond that, there's nothing else. One of the promises that I've made as your legislature is, frankly, to reduce more legislation that I'm adding in. Right now in Georgia, our regulatory code, we have 109,000 times it says you may not, shall not, must not. California has 300,000 of those words in their code. But frankly, my job is to remove restrictions from you so that you have more freedom and ability to live your life, flourish the way you want to, and that is best for you and your family. If we've learned anything over the past 2 years, the heavy hand of government is not good. We've seen students set behind, we've seen businesses shut down. We need to get government off your back. So I love the question. I would pass a budget that takes care of our folks that most need it, but at the same time, I would actually reduce the amount of legislation and burden on you so that you and your families can flourish and really begin to fight what is a horrible economy out there. If we get government out of the way, that has been the problem right now that a lot of us are facing, is this awful economy driven largely by too much government. I think we'll see a much better and stronger Georgia. So that would be my plan. Thank you.
With my healthcare background, the very first piece of legislation I would want to get through is full expansion of Medicaid. It will be an economic driver for this area. Telemedicine is going to be a major portion. To alleviate our rural counties, we need to do this. It will improve our workforce capabilities because we have too many employees. We have over 500,000 Georgians or more who do not have health care, do not have access to health care, cannot pay for it. We need to get that done now.
Hey, I've got fantastic news from my opponent. Republicans have expanded Medicaid. The issue is the Biden administration declined it, turned it down, wouldn't let us expand it for one simple reason. We thought it was reasonable to have 80 hours a month of work requirement, volunteer requirement to receive that Medicaid. Fortunately, a federal judge just recently, last month, ruled that Georgia could expand its Medicaid, so it's been done. The question I would pose back to my opponent is, 4 years in office, she has not moved the needle whatsoever in expanding Medicaid or doing anything in that regard in Georgia. And I would love to see her be more bipartisan in that effect and try to work with our team to get folks the Medicaid they so desperately need.
Well, let's call it the second piece of legislation, because I think I may have just answered, although, I don't want to get into an argument around Medicaid expansion. I just think we really do need to do it for our citizens. There has been some small, such as expansion for postpartum, which we were part of, other aspects. To me, the second piece of legislation that I would like to pass is fully funding public education and redoing our quality basic education formula so that we update that so that our schools, our public schools, have the resources that they need to bring our students up to the 21st century and help those students. Also to fully fund pre-K programs, which I think will also help our workforce opportunities across the state. It's very hard when you do not have access to health care or you do not have access to someone to take care of your small child to go to work and to find that job. So I think we need to do those kinds of things for the citizens of Georgia. And that would be the type of legislation I would first propose, is fully funding QBE would be my second, sorry. Fully funding QBE and updating that model so our public school systems fully have the money that they need.
Great. Yeah, I've got more great news for y'all. Thanks to conservative leadership over the COVID, Georgia right now is sitting on a $6 billion surplus, and we've been able to invest a lot of that into education, including a $5,000 raise for our teachers. So we've been doing a fantastic job. That we can check the box in that regard. A lot of the reason I'm running is because I want to get stuff done for you and advocate for students, parents, our first responders. And it was just shocking to me looking back at my opponent's record of what has been accomplished. And it's very thin. There's not much there. And so that's why I'm asking for your vote. Because we need to get stuff done. We need to be able to work together and pass legislation that advances us with big, bold, bright ideas that move our state ahead. And that's who I'm going to be. I'm going to be a worker bee down there, a policy nerd, and get stuff done and actually achieve things on your behalf down at the legislature.
Thank you, Kennedy. Senator Robichaux, you have 1 minute to move over.
Well, and again, those of us who are served in the State House, we know that bipartisan bills pass, and those are approximately 78% of all bills that are passed. Things such as the mental health parity bill, things such as expanding Medicaid for postpartum women, other issues, funding for teachers. I voted for that also. It's very interesting when we say get things done in a bipartisan manner. We do work in a bipartisan manner. I have done that. 6 or more of my bills that I have sponsored have been picked up by Republicans and placed into bills that have now been passed. So granted, many are not under my name, but unfortunately, sometimes those are the way things work. But I'm there to get things done. I don't need the credit. I don't need to stand up and say it's me, me, me. What I'm trying to do is make sure something does get done and has gotten done for the citizens here.
Thank you, Kennedy. Hi, everyone. My name is Shawn, and I'm a junior at Innovation Academy. And I will be one of your moderators for tonight. So for this round, I will ask each candidate a question specifically designed for them. You will have 2 minutes to answer, your opponent will have 1 minute to respond, and you will have 1 minute to rebut. So for our first question, candidate out, in your campaign video titled Count Me In, you stated, quote, "We live in a state where it is easier to buy a gun than it is to vote," unquote. Why did you make the statement, and give us at least 2 specific examples as to why you believe the statement you made to be correct?
Thank you. That was a good question. That was directed for me. You guys are doing it. So I made that statement because it's true. Okay? What we saw with gun safety and gun violence legislation this past session was that Governor Kemp's flagship piece of legislation, the first bill out of the gate, was something to make it easier to carry a loaded weapon in public with no sort of permitting process. That was the first bill out of the gate. So what that means is that there is a significant number of people in the state, about 1/4, according to a study by the Journal of the American Medical Association, who can purchase a gun without undergoing any sort of background check at all, and then carry a loaded gun in public without having to further go through a permitting process that would include a background check. Okay? That's how easy it is. That's how permissive gun legislation is in this state. Now let's talk about voting. In my first term in the state Senate, the Republican majority legislator pushed through Senate Bill 202, which was the omnibus voting restriction bill that basically made it much more difficult for people to access the ballot. This was a reaction to the results of the 2020 election, and we can get into that. That would be way more than 20 minutes. However, what it was a reaction to the flood of absentee ballots that people were able to access and the huge spike in the ability of people in our community to vote, specifically in communities of color like ours, okay? So in reaction to this, many restrictions were passed that made it more difficult to vote, and these restrictions actually exceed the type of restrictions that are in place in order to own and carry a loaded handgun in public.
Such kind of irresponsible statements are the one that stops bringing new businesses into the state. Thankfully, nobody in America believes those statements anymore. It is not easy to get a gun, easier than registering to vote, because you can go to the library and register to vote within 2 minutes. Guns are not easy to buy for criminals. For a law-abiding citizen, it takes time. He thinks very carefully. He talks to his family. How many times you have seen in any Atlanta murders, a law-abiding citizen has used his concealed weapon to kill anybody. It is the people, the real criminals who carry these guns, illegal guns, and they are the one. We don't have a choice other than to own a gun to protect our family. Families are very important to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I've noticed that a lot of times Republicans, when they talk about gun safety legislation, they revert to this sort of good guy, bad guy with the gun narrative. What we have to remember is that gun violence in this country is not all of one type. In fact, the most common form of gun violence is actually suicide. Another form of gun violence that we don't like to talk about is accidental discharges. For example, children getting access to guns and shooting themselves, family members, friends accidentally. When we have profligate guns, ubiquitous guns in this society, it makes it much easier for these types of things to happen. And when we don't have things like safe storage laws that protect our minors, and we don't have things like universal background checks to make sure that every person who purchases a gun, including through private gun sales and transfers, gets background checked, and we don't have things like mandatory waiting periods to provide a cooling off period for the types of crimes that are impulsive or crimes of passion, this is when we see many types of gun violence in this state.
On your website, your priorities to slash income taxes for families and businesses would mean income tax cuts that are taking away money that is otherwise going to the government. If we were to cut taxes, where would we be pulling the funding to support these initiatives you seek to achieve?
One thing Republicans are very good is fiscal conservatism. They know how to budget. That's why you saw the result of in the last year. Even though it was a pandemic time, we had a surplus revenue. This was not there any time. When Republicans took over about 20 years ago in the administration, the reserve funds, the rainy day funds were zero, not even a penny. Today we have a 4.3 billion, and that is the legal limit that the Georgia Constitution allows us to keep, not more than that. That is 15% of the budget time. Second thing is, the slashing the taxes is because we want to give the money back to the citizens who worked hard for that money so that they can spend that money for the families, education for the children, and all that. That's why Governor gave a rebate, and also he's working with the balance 2.3 billion that we have surplus. Come January, that will be part of the budget, so there won't be too many taxes on us, or there will not be any new taxes. But the Republicans do this, but when already the governor candidate, Stacey Abrams, says, when she comes into the power, she will give that entire 2-3 billions on the welfare or other activities to go to the people. No, people who worked hard, they should get the refunds, not everybody. Thank you.
Candidate Al, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. I'd like people to notice that my opponent didn't actually answer the question. So Republicans do like to talk in generalities, but not in specifics. So first of all, I do agree that some measure of tax relief is due. I talked about how I voted in favor of the income tax decrease this past session to give some measure of economic relief for hardworking Georgians in these hard times. However, People like my opponent talk about completely slashing the income tax here in the state of Georgia, okay? And they don't talk about how we're going to make up the deficit, which I actually think was what the question was about. We're talking about a $14 billion amount of revenue that the state gets in that is not going to be replaced. And that basically makes up half of the budget of K through 12 schools, public schools in the state of Georgia. So I find it interesting to be standing in one of the best public schools in the state and not talk about how slashing our income tax is going to affect the ability to fund K through 12 schools in this excellent school district.
You have 1 minute to rebut.
This is what you are misrepresenting my stand. When I say slash the taxes, every year, every budget year, we're going to go 0.5, 0.25%, not the whole thing. Because we understand, we go by as the time dictates us. Like if there is a surplus income, or we find the new resources to raise the money. We are not going to cut the budget for education under any cost. That anybody should understand that. The Republicans are for education, and we are not going to cut funding for the education. The only time it happened was pandemic time. Again, we are restoring to the normal levels. These are the things. Please don't misrepresent me that I'm asking to eradicate or totally eliminate the Georgia income tax. No, absolutely not. At a time, in 4 or 5 years it takes. That time we can be part of the states like Texas and Florida saying that we too don't have any state income tax.
Thank you.
I apologize to the audience members. My microphone batteries seem to be malfunctioning, but I'll try my best to project for those in the back. Now we will move on to our lightning round. So all you will have to do is hold up your cards that are sitting on the table in front of you, and you will simply reply yes or no. Now, on to the first question. Would you like to see Georgia implement ranked choice voting? Yes or no?
Can you repeat that for me? The last word, what you said?
Would you like to see Georgia implement ranked choice voting?
Ranked choice.
Ranked choice voting. Like Alaska. Like Cambridge. San Francisco. Now, on to our second question. Do you support legalizing recreational marijuana in Georgia? Yes or no? I apologize, you do have to hold the applause till the end of the day. Last question. Are you in favor of working to reduce the tuition paid for public higher education institutions in Georgia? And that is the end of our lightning round. Now on to the second rotation.
Thank you, Brady. So to begin the second round, the first question is for candidate Still. Candidate Still, if you were granted the ability to push through one piece of legislation with no barriers, a guaranteed passage through the House and Senate, and the governor's signature, what would it be and why? You have 2 minutes to respond.
We're going to beat the sales tax question to death, I think, before the end of the night. But what's important to understand is that we have a $6 billion surplus today because of keeping our economy open during COVID. It's unprecedented in our state history. As Scott Hilton alluded to, $1 billion of that surplus is going back into every Georgian's pocket when they do their returns. What Narender was explaining is that when you reduce the state income tax, you can't just do it overnight. But if you look at Florida, look at Texas, look at Tennessee, they've eliminated their state income tax, looked at it more as a consumption tax in ways that people that are visiting our state can help offset some of that load. No Republican wants to cut anything with public education. No Republican wants to do anything to hurt or damage in any way the expansion of Medicaid to make sure that every Georgian is insured in some way. So the number one thing that I'm going to be focused on is reducing the state income tax to make us more competitive with those other states.
Thank you. Candidate Uddin, you have 1 minute to respond.
When it comes to Florida and Texas, we always say that like they don't have any income taxes, but then they have a very higher property taxes. So somehow that money, somewhere it has to come here. Same token, when we have 6 billion surplus amount here, this money should have come to our school system, it should come to our park system, it should come to our city like Johns Creek or Duluth or any other places. And if we are in the office, we need to make sure that when you have a surplus, that's not a very good model there as a businessman, because I should not have surplus, my amount should be distributed properly. So we need to work on that. Thank you.
Josh, you said in your opening statement that this was the land of struggle, but yet you live in a neighborhood that pays some of the highest property taxes in the state. Further, our Democratic Fulton County commissioners tried to slip in doubling North Fulton's property taxes as if our mayors and our city council were not going to pick up on it. So if we want to look at economic policy by the Democrats, look at Fulton County commissioners who literally just last week tried to double property taxes for no other reason than to create new pet projects in the south end of the county that have nothing to do with what's happening here. Failed economic policy by the Democrats all the way around.
Thank you. Same question goes to Candidate Uddin. Candidate Uddin, if you were granted the ability to push through one piece of legislation with no barriers to guarantee passage through the House and Senate and the governor's signature, what would it be and why? Go to Mr. Response.
I want to fulfill my daughter's dream. She was 7 years old, she always wanted to be a teacher. And now she's a senior, she doesn't want to be a teacher because why? They don't make enough money. I need to make sure that the state do their best to make sure that properly train our teacher, pay them properly so they can teach our students, not only the school, they can also pay
I think it was me.
Sorry.
That was it.
So we need to make sure that people who works at the school, cafeteria, library, we have to make sure that they get properly paid, they get trained, and we need to make sure that these teachers, they can educate our kids, just not only to graduate from high school or college. We need to make sure that they can treat them as a world-class citizen so they can compete globally and make them a better person. They can become a good citizen for our state, for our district, and for the United States.
Thank you for your response. Candidate Still, you have 1 minute to respond.
I'm going to steal a line from Scott Hilton. Good news, our teachers just got a $5,000 raise last year and they're getting another raise this year. All of that is from the economic policy from Governor Brian Kemp. So when it comes to young men and women that want to go into the education field, I think it's amazing. My cousin is an educator, but guess what? She can't do what she needs to do because of the tight, horrible Medicaid regulations that are happening right now that need completely overhauling. So it turns out that 4 of us up here have a background in healthcare. I used to work in one of the largest nurse staffing agencies in the entire country. So I've employed thousands of nurses in my lifetime, and I understand deeply what it is for critical jobs like nurses and education to get the help and assistance they need.
Thank you for your response. Candidate Uddin, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Surprisingly, we always see those bonuses come during the election year. So if I am there, we need to make sure that these bonuses doesn't come during the election year. It should come year long. It should come, so we need to make the school a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. For this round, we will have candidate-specific questions. So, candidate Hilton, you say that you're passionate about ensuring that tax dollars follow the student. Does this mean that you believe that tax dollars paid by the residents of House District 48 should remain within the school district? If so, how would you accomplish this? And if not, explain how the tax dollars would actually follow the students. You have 2 minutes to respond.
Great question. Again, I think over the last 2 years, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about how big government kind of dictates our choices in education. And frankly, we need to shift that power from government to you, the parent. Not every student is built the same. We are our own unique person. We do not learn the same way. And we cannot have a one-size-fits-all education model. We've got to give the power back to you, to the parent. I will always stand up for you, the parent, the student, and even teachers that they are under a load of bureaucracy right now, and they just want to teach. And that's what they do best, and we need to let them do that. Yes, when I was in the House, I sponsored a bill for special education students to allow them to have more money at their discretion, their education dollars, to figure out how best to serve their student. They have such unique education needs, and it doesn't always fit in a one-size-fits-all box. And so, absolutely, the dollars will stay here. Absolutely, we will continue to fund the best and brightest schools in our district. But at the same time, we can also allow you, the parents, to have more say, more flexibility in how your child is educated. I think that is one of the biggest distinctions right now between the parties, and one of the big things that conservatives are standing up for, to say, we stand for you, we stand for your student, and we've got to find ways to both fund school systems and give parents more flexibility.
You have 1 minute to respond.
So I am 100% against the school voucher program. When I looked at Fulton County, if we created a program such as that, $10,000 per of your tax dollars could quote unquote follow your student. That goes straight out of the Fulton County school budget. Day one, there are approximately enough students in Fulton County who are already in private schools or at home that the Fulton County school budget on day one every year would lose $100 million. What programs would we cut? $100 million day one, that's before one more student. I agree parents should have say in their schools, students' education. We've always had that. There are things we have to learn, but I am not for school vouchers.
Candidate Hilton, you have 1 minute to rebut.
That's wild, right? Like, it's not government's money, it's our money. Like, we ought to have control over it. We have schools right now. We have schools, our area is blessed. There are schools in our state who are failing, and kids are trapped in failing schools, and they've got no other option. We need to get behind those students and those parents and those teachers and give them a brighter light and a brighter future. Opportunity is unlocked through education, and there are students who are falling behind right now. The scores just came out. After COVID, there's a 10% drop in reading ability at third grade students. That can't happen. We've got to give our students more options. We've got to close the gap that was created from backward policies from COVID and get these students caught back up. And it's by giving you, the parent, who know your child best, the ability to do that. Thank you.
Candidate Robichaux, on your website, under the equal justice issues, you state that you would, quote, invest resources into schools that are serving low-income neighborhoods, end quote. What resources specifically would you plan to invest in this initiative, and what outcomes or changes are you looking to obtain?
So I think I heard you correctly, had to do with investment in low-income schools in regards to improving the criminal justice, into criminal equity. Yes, I'm sorry.
Issues. You state that you would, quote, invest resources in schools serving low-income neighborhoods. What resources specifically do you plan on investing in this initiative, and what outcome or change are you looking to obtain?
Thank you for repeating that. So again, I would update the QBE, the Quality Basic Education Model, with a proportion up there, looking at the ways in which we can fund more to our lower income school areas, because a lot of our schools are funded by our property taxes and other things. Again, we're blessed in this area. That's not so much of a concern of ours. What I think that's going to do is also help reduce the pipeline to the jails that we are seeing in some of our schools in Georgia. We also know here in Georgia, 1 in 6 adults in the state of Georgia read below a 6th grade level. That's across our state. So we know there are areas of our state that need additional educational funds to catch up. COVID, of course, opened that up. We have parts of our state that do not have broadband access. How are you supposed to teach when the students had to go sit in a McDonald's to do their homework? You know, we were hit with an unprecedented thing. The schools were not trained how to teach in a remote learning center. I think they did an amazing job and adapted very quickly, but we know things like that were going to happen, unfortunately. So we are playing catch up. But there are some of our schools across this state who need more funding and need more resources to help them catch up. And I would do those kinds of things to look at that.
I mean, that's great stuff on a website, but as your state representative, I passed 2 major pieces of legislation. Number one, House Bill 787, which increased funding for charter schools, right? So if you're in a public school and you don't like it and it's failing you, you've got now more money to go to the school of your choice in a charter school here in Georgia. That's fantastic, and it lifts up people who are in maybe poorer or harder communities to give them a choice to get out from that. Number 2, I supported the Georgia Gold Scholarship Program, which is one of the best things we've got in our state right now, where you, the taxpayer, get to contribute, get a tax credit, and folks who come from poor communities now have an option to go to receive private education at a private school. That's fantastic. I mean, that's unlocking education potential for everyone, and that's a big difference between the parties right now. And so we believe in educational choice for everyone. Thank you.
1 minute to have a rebuttal.
And again, I think when we talk about schools that are underperforming due to low-income areas, not everyone can be served by being able to go to a charter school. If you have to get on a bus and travel over 2 hours to the closest charter school in parts of rural Georgia, that doesn't help you. They need more funding to bring them up to the same level of educational opportunities that we have across the state. We need opportunities to also bring in vocational educational programs into some of our high schools in areas that I think would also help our underserved children.
I will be drawing a question from the box. Candidate Al, according to the U.S. News, Georgia is nationally ranked 30th in pre-K to 12 education and 19th in higher education. What would you most like to see changed in Georgia's public school systems to make sure that all our children receive the best educational opportunities in the nation?
Thank you, great question. And this question means a lot to me because all 3 of my children have been attending North Fulton Public Schools in this area. So there's a couple parts to this question. The first part is a bit to what Representative Robichaux was discussing, is that even though we talk a lot about how we've restored some of the school funding in the past session, we have to remember that this is after 10 years of attrition of slicing and slashing the education budget. Austerity measures were taken during COVID, so restoring up to pre-pandemic levels still does not get us to the level that we need to be. So we need to talk about how we look at the QBE formula, adequately fund the schools in our district, and give them the resources they need to serve our students. Second thing, we talked about higher education. And this is a bigger topic, bigger than 2 minutes, but one thing we need to discuss is how we make college education more affordable in state, right? We talked a little bit already about the Hope Scholarship and these types of things that we address and do pretty well in Georgia. But I think there's more we can do, especially for students who deserve a college education and are maybe more low income. And we can talk about adding on, not in lieu of, but in addition to the current merit-based Hope Scholarship, to add a needs-based Hope Scholarship out of the surplus lottery revenue funds that we have. Currently, the lottery revenue funds go towards funding education. They're supposed to hold about $500 million in reserve. I believe that's roughly the number. And at present, the lottery reserve fund is more than twice the amount they're supposed to hold, so about $1.2 billion. That That can certainly be applied to need-based scholarships to get more students from schools and families and income levels all over the state to the promise of a higher education.
Thank you. Candidate Reddy, you have 1 minute to respond.
Promise in the referendum when we did in Georgia, that was the promise we made to the Georgia citizens. And also in the legislature, it was the promise we made to the legislators, through them to the entire citizenry. We want to keep the Hope Scholarship as it is. Let us not mess with it. In the South, there is a saying that if it is not broken, don't fix it. That is the way it should be.
Candidate Au, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. What I said was that in addition to the merit-based Hope Scholarship, I would like to add on a needs-based Hope Scholarship. So that does not mean changing or getting rid of the merit-based Hope Scholarship. I say this as someone who just sent her first child to college, so I know about this program very well. I appreciate it very much and what it does for our students. But we talked a lot about the $6.6 billion surplus that we have in our state budget. We talked a bit just now about the lottery reserve fund that is in excess of what it's supposed to hold and is supposed to be applied towards education. What are we waiting for? What are we not using it for, and why are we leaving students out, right? So in addition to not changing the merit-based Hope Scholarship, of which my child also applied, and I appreciate it very much, to add on and widen and broaden these opportunities for all students, including low-income students.
Thank you. School shootings are becoming a more prevalent issue. What would you propose to best tackle this problem, and how would you suggest the state fund such a proposal?
Most of these mass shootings are, if you look at the backgrounds, those are mentally disturbed citizens or students. So recently the legislature was good enough to pass the Mental Parity Act, that is the Mental Disease Parity Act, and now all the insurance companies are bound to cover, they are mandated to cover mental diseases like any regular disease. And every high school should have a counselor. It is not some of the counselors, some of the high schools only should have a counselor. Because in Georgia, almost like 1 in 3, everyone has, they have these mental issues, and they should be able to go to these mental counselors or whatever, but the insurance should be able to pay for that. And I'm glad the legislature passed, and my opponent also voted for it, and I appreciate for that. But at the same time, how can we stop? Some things are unstoppable. Only thing is we have to do the groundwork. Particularly the parents should look at the child, how he is performing and what kind of mental status he is in. Who else is going to take care of who else is going to observe the child more than the parents? The parents, the moment they see some kind of abnormal activity in the child, they should take it to the school counselor or a medical doctor and get the proper treatment. We cannot just throw everything just because some mass shootings happening. That goes back to always hitting the gun control and all these things. Every time we have that one, we should not look at this like a fighting for some kind of political issues. This is a family issue. Say a child who is lost in a mass shooting, the parents can never be able to live normally again forever. So let us focus that on as a mental issues, and we have to find a solution, and we need to get over with that.
Candidate Au, you have 1 minute to respond.
My opponent just said, how do you stop something that is unstoppable? I do not entertain that premise. Gun violence is a public health crisis in this country, and I want to point out one thing that relates to school shootings. Obviously, school shootings get the most attention of all because they're very explosive and newsworthy issues, but gun violence as a whole is a huge problem in this country. So, gun violence is the #1 cause of pediatric death in this country. If this was another cause of pediatric death, would you say, how can we stop something that's unstoppable? How dare we take that attitude? I do not entertain that premise. Public health problems require multimodal public health solutions. 3 solutions I have. 1, universal background checks. 2, mandatory waiting periods for firearm purchases. 3, safe storage laws for homes that have guns where minors can access them. Addresses lots of different issues, but big problems deserve big solutions. Thank you.
Candidate Reddy, you have 1 minute to respond.
So these are the slogans I see. this gun violence is a health issue, these kind of things. Those are the things that doesn't make any impact on the communities. The community wants to see how you can stop means parental responsibility, and in the school the teacher's responsibility. They have to watch these kids what they are doing. If they say some of the schools their drugs are rampant, who is going to stop them? The legislation is not going to, just because you make a legislation, it is not going to stop it. You have to work and find out through the counselors and school educators and parents. If a child is doing drugs, who else will know first? The parents should know. But the parents have no time these days to focus on their children. So we have to understand that this is a total problem. Don't make it like a political problem. This is not a political problem. It is a problem that came up in most of these developing countries, particularly a country like America has everything. So these things are happening. Please, don't make this a political.
Thank you.
Now we move on to the lightning round. For the first question, do you believe in limiting Georgia congressional terms? On to the second question. Do you support a needs-based component to the Hope Scholarship? Last, do you believe the state of Georgia should require a permit for private gun sales? Now on to the third rotation.
Thank you, Reddy. So this next question is for Candidate Stowe. Candidate Stowe, we are now going to turn the tables and let you ask a question of your opponent. You have 1 minute to ask a question, and Candidate Uddin, you will have 2 minutes to respond.
June 7th, 2020. You attended an anti-police BLM rally and you posted it on your Facebook page. It's still there. Fast forward to minute 12. It's pretty entertaining. People in the audience are yelling F12, F12, which is slang for F the police. I shared that with Johns Creek Police Chief Mitchell and Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Freeman. They found it pretty interesting. They, and I think the audience would like to know, how as a state senator, you're going to best represent public safety needs and support our local police.
Candidate, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I think everybody knows what happened at that time. Yes, I do support Black Lives Matter. I'm not afraid to say that one. I'm very proud to say that one, because when you see these individual lives are at risk, we have no value for these people. And I went there to support them. There was nothing there that anything from my side came out against any police officer. In fact, you know what? I wanted to tell one thing, that I'm always funding our police more. I always wanted to see that our police forces, especially in my city or any other city in this, Senate district candidate, our district, I want to make sure that our police are properly trained, they have proper equipment, and they have proper police forces, and we also have to increase their proper salary. Thank you.
Good answer.
Candidate Stowe, you have 1 minute to rebut.
The Democratic agenda is to defund our police, and that movement is all about trying to make our streets unsafe. In the city of Atlanta, where crime is highest in our state, there are 400 openings for police under Democratic leadership, and a Democratic mayor, and a Democratic city council, and a Democratic set of county commissioners. So I find it really hard when someone who's saying that F12, F our police, but yeah, no, I'm all for you, I'm all funding you, let's go, let's do that. The very police that they were waving their fists at and yelling F12 in their face are the very ones that have 400 openings because they don't want to work there because it's unsafe and they can't do their jobs well. That's Democratic policy leading us down a bad road.
After the election 2020, one thing I believe that people's choice and people's voice must be heard. Voters in Georgia, they voted. New president got elected. I'm all for it. When people's voice and choice must be heard. That's the very basic thing that we must respect. We live in a #1 democratic country in the world. We should be proud of it. We have, I did not know there were some fake electors' name came.
Candidate, do you have your question?
Yes. This election, are you going to accept the election? When we win, whoever, if I win, are you going to accept it? If you win, of course, I'm going to accept it. But same token, what was the biggest issue that, December you did not accept that? Thank you.
So I think what Josh is referring to is that I was one of Georgia's Republican presidential electors. There was a margin of error of less than 0.1 differential between now President Joe Biden, former President Donald Trump. Everyone agrees that Biden is the President of the United States, so I think everyone has clearly accepted that. But in the moment of the presidential electors, there was a pivot in time where there were lawsuits challenging the outcome. I was only there to preserve a legal challenge. We weren't fake electors. We weren't fake anything. We were alternate electors who, in the eye of the public, in the eye of the media, said we are only doing this in the event of an overturn, because had we not, and there had been an overturn, then the ballots would not have counted. That was it. And the great news is that I was one of the 2 people, the other one being one of your close business associates, who went to Washington and spoke on behalf of Georgia in a favorable light and why we did it, and they thanked us for our service, and you probably saw it on TV. So it was well understood why we did it, what was involved. There was nothing illegal about it. There was nothing secretive about it. And further, this was started, the whole concept of challenging an electoral vote goes all the way back to 1960 in the Nixon-Kennedy race, and we followed legal precedent to that end. That was literally all that was done. So if you look at that, you look at Florida, Bush-Gore in 2000, there is a history of examining and saying, let's press the pause button and make sure that what we're looking at are fair and balanced elections. So will I accept the election results? Absolutely. Thank you.
Since Shawn actually said about this fake letters name, actually, I didn't even know until this word came, Atlanta Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, that fake electors running in District 48. So there's something that I knew there were people there, but your name came at that time. I found out that you were my opponent. In a process, what you mentioned in December, what happened, there is a process that we have to go through. So I believe that you did not follow that process. I think this should have done in a proper process. Thank you.
We'll have a question out of the top. So the first question goes to candidate Hilton. What is your overall stance on healthcare coverage in Georgia? And if you see a need for improvement, what would you propose? And how would you fund and implement this plan? If elected, what would you do to address the state's substance abuse crisis? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Again, another great question. And previously I served on the healthcare committee in the House. And one of the things that I was most passionate about is there's absolutely no transparency in healthcare, and we've got to do that. Healthcare has gotten way too expensive, and there's all this sort of surprise billing that you go get a procedure done, you have no idea how much it's going to cost, and then all of a sudden you get a bill, a month later telling you to pay for this or that. We've got to bring transparency into healthcare. We've got to bring innovation into healthcare. One of the bills that I'm going to champion when I get down there is what's called a legislative sandbox. It's been done in Arizona and some other states where what it does, it allows companies to go into our state, innovate in a small atmosphere, figure out what works best, and then expand from there. We've got to drive innovation in healthcare. We frankly have got to get government out of healthcare to help drive down prices. So transparency, innovation, getting government out of healthcare, and then expanding options. There's a lot of places in our state where there's so much red tape and regulation where you can't expand, where we don't have doctors. We've got to figure out ways to incent nurses, doctors to go to some of the rural parts of our state. We are absolutely blessed here, but we have huge gaps across our state where there needs to be health care. So that's what I would address. You asked about substance abuse. That's another real issue. It's really driven by the open border policy we have down in the South. We've got drugs just pouring into our country and unfortunately our state. We've got to put in more resources to address that as well. Thank you.
So I am happy to report that we passed a surprise billing law in Georgia this last legislative session, so that they are required to report what the costs are. We've also passed that hospitals are reporting their overall cost of care. So if you are going into an emergency room or procedure, they are required now by law to let you know what the cost will be. If your provider is in network, is not in network, those kinds of things are available now. So that's a great idea, and we did pass this in a bipartisan manner. So that's a great thing, and I would agree with that. And we talk about substance abuse, in my mind, that's opioid addiction, other things like that. We're part of a recovery program, and we need to look at that. Those kinds of things, it's not simple answers to any of healthcare issues these days. As I said, I think expanding Medicaid will allow more providers to go into the rural healthcare area, expanding telemedicine access to people. When Georgia got the tobacco tax, sorry.
Yep, I was proud during my time in the legislature actually get the work started on the Surprise Billing Act. I'm glad to see it pass, but if I were to poll the audience here and ask you to raise your hand, how many times you've gone to the doctor and you know how much that bill is going to be when you get back home, I guarantee you everybody raise their hand right now and say, I've got no idea. Every other industry we have out there, whether you're buying a sandwich or getting a new tire, you know how much it's going to cost. We are not to that point here in Georgia, and that's something we've got to absolutely fix in our state. One of the other issues I'd address is some of our certificate of needs laws that are really driving practitioners out of our state. We need to bring more in, and we need to increase folks that are on private pay insurance so that our hospitals, so we can grow our hospital system and see our healthcare flourish here in the state.
Candidate Robichaux, what are two examples of steps you would take to ensure that our police departments are well funded and integrated with the rest of the community? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Fully funded
And integrated with the rest of our community.
So I grew up in Louisiana, and in my town they were called peace officers, and that's what I think of as police. So as far as fully funding, again, we were all part of the House this time that passed giving funding to additional salaries to our first responders. One of the things, I had a conversation with the Police Benevolent Society a couple of weeks ago. We have police officers in parts of our state that do not have health insurance because the municipalities they work for are so small they can't afford to pay for their health insurance. I've already started discussions with our state troopers division to find out how we could arrange for all police officers in our state to at least have access, even if they buy in to that concept with our state troopers insurance plan. So that's one of the ways. I think, again, the Mental Health Parity Act that we've just passed gives more money to the police if there's an additional training program there to help our police officers better prepare when they go into situations that are mental health crisis. Because again, we know that's where our officers go in, and there can be very dangerous for them, among other things. Getting more in tune, I think when we talk those kinds of things, giving them the resources to do that does help them become more part of the community and seen, again, as I always grew up seeing them as peace officers, someone we can trust, someone we know is going to be there when we need them, and that's what we want, that's what we have here. So I think we need to do those kinds of things and make sure we are fully supporting our police.
That's a fantastic answer. The only issue is it doesn't match with reality. Robichaux's record on crime and police is abysmal, to be honest with you. Houston Gaines had a bill. What we've seen statewide is Democrat-run cities have tried to reduce funding for their police. The legislature passed a bill that would cap cities from doing that. Your representative voted no. She agrees with essentially defunding the police in some of our cities. And the issue is, we're seeing the impact of that. The city of Atlanta now, crime is coming up into our community. I know in our area of Peachtree Corners, broad daylight, we had a shooting right at QT. It's coming our way, and it's because of these Democrat-run cities that are not funding their police, and that is a topic that is supported by your representative. And all you've got to do is check Robichaux's record on that. It's right there, black and white. So, appreciate the question.
So I would encourage all of you to check my entire record. To me, that was an issue of local controls. The state needs to learn to stay out of local politics. And a lot of things are better determined by the local people that have been elected, by the citizens of those areas. Do I approve of it? That's not for me to say. I believe in local control. What I saw, go ahead and check my record on most of the bills that local control was trying to be removed, and that the state, as anything, was coming in and dictating to your city council members, your mayor, how they could run their city. I said no, and I will always say no to that.
For this round, I will be asking candidate out. Same question. Candidate out. If you were granted the ability to push through one piece of legislation with no barriers, a guaranteed passage through the House and Senate, and the governor's signature, what would it be and why?
Thank you. I'm going to talk about something that Representative Robichaux talked about, and I'm going to give a fiscal argument as to why it doesn't make sense to not take up this piece of legislation. What I'm talking about is full Medicaid expansion under the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. Georgia is one of the sickest states in the nation. I know this because I take care of many patients every single day. Full Medicaid expansion would do a number of things. First of all, it would extend coverage to more than 500,000 uninsured Georgians who cannot get health insurance at present. Number two, it would bring back money to our state that we've already paid in the form of federal taxes that is currently being diverted elsewhere because our state refuses to welcome this money back to help our own citizens. Number three, what it would do would be to prevent this attrition of safety net and rural and community hospitals that we're seeing across the state. We talk a lot about the rural healthcare crisis that we've seen, but it's hitting much closer to home now, as we see in the past month that the Atlanta Medical Center, one of only 2 level 1 trauma centers in the metro Atlanta area, is closing because of financial concerns, right? So we have a state that has one of the highest uninsurance rates in the country, a state that is losing safety net hospitals and hospitals that will take care of patients regardless of their insurance to pay, and we are losing the money that we've already spent that is due back to us, right? Remember that full Medicaid expansion has a 9-to-1 federal match, meaning that of the 10% that Georgia would put in to expand Medicaid, 90% is funded by the federal government, the taxes that we've already paid to the federal government. We're only one of 12 states that has refused to expand Medicaid. That is why we are one of the sickest states in the nation. I think it's a no-brainer, and we're running out of reasons to say no.
These are the statements saying that Georgia is the sickest state in the country, one of the sickest states in the country, and Stacey Abrams says Georgia is the Georgia is the worst state to live in the country. These are the statements that stops other people to bring their businesses or students from other states coming and joining here in Georgia Tech or other places. About Medicaid expansion, Republicans were doing expansion on their own convenience, in the sense in the last 7 years, we had about 1 million people added to the Medicaid. And the 90%, 10%, what my opponent did not tell you is, that's not a permanent agreement. Next year, federal government can change it to again 70 to 30. Where are we going to dig for the money? Those are the things we have to look into clearly. It's not a statement, it's not a slogans that works. It is the practicality that works.
Thank you. When it comes to practicality, I'm actually the only one who's been quoting numbers. So, first thing, we talk about business and incentivizing business to come here. The fact that we have not expanded Medicaid actually disincentivizes many large businesses from coming here because you can see that this is a state that has a struggling healthcare system and where our personal healthcare costs, even people who have private health insurance, are much higher because we are bearing the burden of a high uncompensated care rate that we see because of our high uninsurance rate. Number two, Republicans love to cite that, oh, you know, it's a 9-to-1 match now, but the federal government could change it at any second and then we're on the hook for the rest of that money. They've said this since the ACA was passed. It's been more than a decade. That has not happened, and in fact, the federal government is further incentivizing states like Georgia, you know, holdout states, by giving us actually a little bit more of an incentive to fully expand Medicaid. I think I'll leave it at that because I think I'm running out of time.
If you were granted the ability to push through one piece of legislation with no barriers, a guaranteed passage through the House and Senate, and the governor's signature, what would it be and why?
One thing I would love to see is these counties, particularly Fulton County recently, what they did, local option sales tax, they unilaterally decided we go from 5% to 35% share in this 1% sales tax. That may not be too much for the county income, but it is very huge income for the city governments. If you take that kind of a percentage all of a sudden, the cities cannot find money to fund their police, infrastructure, sewer system, and water. So I want to see there should be a legislation that the counties cannot unilaterally make a decision like that, and the other option for them to is cities is just to lose everything. So basically the counties are blackmailing, and Fulton County is doing. I want to introduce a legislation to restrict the power of the counties in blackmailing the city governments.
I actually agree with my proponent on this. In case people haven't been following this in the local news, this has to do with the local option sales tax, which at present the county takes, I think it's about 5%, is that right? Whereas the cities get the rest to spend on municipal issues like law enforcement and fire and all these types of things. And what's being proposed now is that the county wants to vastly increase, sort of all in one swoop, up to, I think, is it like 35%? To take that cut off the top, which is really going to cripple cities in this area, right? Like Johns Creek, like Roswell, like Alpharetta, right? So I think this is something that is worthwhile. I think this is something that we really need to talk about, how we get there, and to help our municipalities and to have a good sort of state-level legislature and municipal legislature partnership so that we can make sure that our cities are being supported both on the municipal level but also with the help that we can provide in the state legislature.
To respond.
She agreed with everything I said, so I also agree with her.
All right, we will move on to our last lightning round. Now, for our first question, do you believe that all residents, including illegal aliens, should have the right to vote?
Did I get that right?
Our second question. Do you support using state funds to extend health care coverage to those who fall in the Medicaid gap? For our last question, would you support school choice throughout Georgia?
Can you say that question, please? School choice.
Do we have time? All right. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the last stages of this debate. Before we conclude, Each candidate will have the opportunity to say their closing statement. As a reminder, you all have 2 minutes per statement. Candidate Reddy, you may begin. I apologize.
Hope you didn't take that from my class. As an immigrant, we came to this country, and because we fled the socialism in our country. When I left India 40 years back, there was a socialism, everything was scarce, and we don't have much of a hope. Even though I did my law and I had a job, still I was not happy. Those kind of situations I don't want to arise in this country. In this country, what we want to see is the market economy, the affluence, the way I saw it when I moved here about 40 years ago. But recently, the socialism thing is coming back. It is not socialism, it is communism actually. They are just using a different word. So let us not fall for that kind of trick, and we need to protect our rights, and we need to protect our lifestyle and our families, and we need to have our dreams we have to make our dreams for every one of us. No exceptions. Those who cannot follow us, we can help them, but should not punish the people who work hard and who make it in their life. We should not punish them with this tax, that tax, and all those things. Equitable distribution applies only in the socialism countries, and we don't want to repeat those socialistic conditions in this country. I'm running for this position because I want to see Johns Creek flourishes the way it is flourishing. I want to see our schools are the best in the state of Georgia, and we have the highest average household income in the entire state of Georgia. We want to go that way, and we want to continue to flourish. And at the same time, we want to help the people who are not able to cope up. I made one wrong choice, so I want to correct. I do want to fund the Medicaid gap for the people who doesn't fit in the Medicaid. I actually chose a wrong card. The reason is already the state of Georgia is doing that way. It's not a difference thing anyway. So we are going to continue that one. So I want to continue that. And also my name is Reddy. I'm ready if you are.
Candidate Al, you may begin.
So I just want to thank you again to Northview High School for hosting us, and to student leadership Johns Creek for allowing us a chance to talk to voters tonight. So a lot gets made about the theatrics and the divisiveness of the political process, but let's talk for a second about what ideally a political campaign should be. Political campaigns are job interviews, okay? So as candidates, it is our duty to show the voters why we are the best person for the job. Not to serve as figureheads, not to burnish our egos or to elevate our status, but to do real work. Okay, so how do we show this? We do this by showing our experience and our expertise and the value we bring to these roles, not by talking in poll-tested political buzzwords or in vague generalities, but by bringing ideas that are specific and concrete, granular solutions that help solve the problems that real people are facing. I think it's also important to show our values and our ethics. So I hope I've been able to do that tonight. I hope I've been able to show some of the differences between me and my candidate and my opponent. And now it's sort of up to the voters to decide. It's been the honor of my life to serve this district in the state legislature. I've been effective, and I've been principled in advancing legislation and advancing issues that we care about, including health care, cost of living, reproductive rights, and public safety. I hope I've earned your vote tonight, and thank you so much for this chance to serve you all.
Candidate Robichaux, please begin your closing statement.
So thanks again for the host, committees, and everyone here. Again, I have worked across party lines, and as I said, I'm not one that needs my name up in lights. One of the things I'm very proud of, because of my work in a bipartisan manner, for the first time ever here in Fulton County, we have started the first ever educational tax abatement for our senior citizens. I led that on the Democratic side. It took both parties to work toward that in their various different ways. I believe when we talk to each other, when we learn from each other, we can come up with solutions that are win-win. Nobody needs to lose. I think we all want the same opportunities I've had and my family has had. Access to quality and affordable health care, a great education for our children, chance at economic success, and a safe place to live and raise our children. One of the things that, we talked about a little bit real short, we talked about congressional term limits. I actually, having served now, I believe those of us who serve, we should also have term limits. So one of my pieces of legislation is I want to change the terms of which those of your state senate and representatives serve and include term limits in there. Happy to talk about more of that later. But as we've seen, recent history has shown us that our democracy is important, that we need to fight for it. In 1910, Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech called Citizenship in a Republic. When I won my first race, my husband gave me the poem, or the most famous quote, about the man in the arena. And that talks about the man in the arena is the one who gets in there and does the fighting. Well, I'm going to ask each of you to join me and all of us in that arena by voting to make sure that we can continue to strive for a more perfect union in this wonderful country that we call home.
Candidate Hilton, you may start your closing statement.
Once again, thank you to the students. I'm hopeful for our future. I want to also emphasize one really important thing. We need more civility in our politics, and I want to turn to my opponent and tell her thank you so much for her service to our state. It's not easy. I'm grateful for her. I'm grateful that we've been able to have a good, healthy debate here on stage tonight, and I want to thank you publicly for your service. We've had a lot of discussion about a lot of important issues. We've missed one in particular, though, and I've knocked on thousands of doors. Georgians are hurting right now. Inflation is up, wages is down, savings are lost, and people are hurting. Which party do you trust to put more money back into your pocket and take care of you? Another 2 years of a Biden, Abrams, what path does that put Georgia on? Right now, we are on a good path. We're helping people, but people are struggling. And they need good, strong, conservative leadership. I think about, I was knocking on whatever number door I was on. There was a little kid about 10 years old. He said, I went to Target. I wanted to buy a little Hot Wheel. I saved up all my money, and I got there, and it cost 10 cents more than the last time I was there, and I didn't have the money for it. It's seniors, it's children, it's you, students who are hurting. College is no longer affordable. We need to elect real leaders with real solutions to tackle the real issues that people are facing right now. I've spent a lifetime of serving you, serving this community, and it would be the honor of a lifetime to go back in and do that again for you. We need to elect leadership that cares about your values, you, and who will stand up against big government and stand up for you, the people. For that reason, I ask you to join our team. I'll be out there, would love to meet with you. I'm accessible, put my cell phone on everything. And I ask for your vote on October 17th and once on Election Day, November 8th. Thank you and God bless.
Candidate, you may begin.
One thing we found out this evening, all the candidates that talked about healthcare. I want to be a strong advocate for healthcare. What I see that my Moderna CEO makes a $927 million bonuses. Pfizer makes it $4 billion quarterly profit. That's what I don't like it. And I think as a voter, as a citizen, you don't like it either. Why? Healthcare industry should be morally, ethically responsible corporation. They do not need to make billions of dollars. That way, the state, they can provide people better coverages, they can give them access to Medicaid all the way because of that cost will be a lot cheaper. My dad passed away 3 months ago. He was taking a medication called Ofev. It's $12,841. Same medication back home is only $250. Tell me, why that medication is $250 and it is here $12,000 something. So this is something that we have to fight for it. I'm not against Second Amendment, but I want to make sure that common sense gun law works here. We need to make sure that little kids that do not need to get a gun. You go outside there to a grocery store, you cannot buy a pack of cigarettes if you are under 21. Yet, you can go to our Georgia World Congress Center or Gwinnett Arena during the gun show, you can buy a gun. I mean, even you are 18 years old, an assault weapon, you do not need that. They need to have a proper licensing, they need to have waiting period, they have to have insurance. This is something that we want to make sure that it works for it. Women's, I want to work for all the women's right here. 70% people there women. All these people right here, women's are here. And I want to make sure that women's rights are properly protected. I want to make sure that this city, our community, they get enough funding from the state level, we can work together. And I'm Josh Uddin. Humbly, I'm asking your vote so I can be your servant to serve you. Thank you.
Lastly, candidate Still, you may begin your closing statement.
Michelle's right, this is a job interview. But it's more than a job interview. This is about the future of our state and the future of our kids. Just a few moments ago, Mary talked about local control. Local control is the reason why we have failing schools. It's the reason why 1 in 3 schools in our state are failing. Because local control has been taken away from them. There are 1.8 million kids in the public school system in Georgia. I have 3 daughters, okay? So if you do the math, 1 in 3 schools are failing, and you have 1.8 million kids. That's 600,000 children in Georgia are in failing schools that they cannot do anything about. If we do not fix school choice, we're going to continue down a very dangerous path of the future of our state. Economic, environmental, education, public safety, all the way through. We've talked about Medicaid expansion. What does that mean? Medicaid reimburses 83 cents on the dollar. And if you do very simple math, if you operate on a $100 budget, you're only getting 83 cents. How much longer can a hospital in rural healthcare sustain that? Can you just give more 83 cents on the dollar to more people? No. Medicaid expansion is not giving Medicaid to more people. It's increasing the reimbursement so that the doctors, like Dr. Al, like hospitals, like Atlanta Medical Center, have the financial wherewithal to be able to make more money to survive, to remain operational and solvent. That's what fixes rural healthcare in this state. You cannot talk about something like telemedicine and then in the same breath talk about our kids are doing homeschool in McDonald's because of lack of internet and Wi-Fi. You have to be able to look at the big picture on this. This is a job interview, and the very future of all of us depends on it. Thank you.
And that marks the end of our debate. Thank you to all the candidates that participated tonight. I would also like to thank our audience for being respectful and courteous to each candidate. And such an amazing job from our Secretary of State Ambassador team tonight. I'd like to take a moment to thank Ms. Mary Beth Cooper for helping all throughout this debate preparation process. And last but not least, I have to thank Ms. Irene Sanders. Our team sponsor. We are all so incredibly grateful, and we could not have done any of this without you. You have provided incomparable mentorship to each and every one of us. And I'm proud to call myself a student ambassador because of you. Thank you everyone for attending the debate. And please remember to vote on November 8th or use the early voting options. Now candidates, please remain on stage for a photo with our ambassador team. And any of the LJC board members or dignitaries in attendance, please join us in this photo. Thank you and have a good night.